Hey everybody, Rick here, sitting in a different seat because there's a cat sleeping in my normal seat. Let's not waste any time and get right into Robot of Sherwood.
You're very, very nicely done with the box, sir.
Robot of Sherwood is not a very good episode. I'm just going to kind of come right out and say that, and I'll try to justify it without shitting on it too bad. It's not that it's a bad episode, it's just that I was kind of hoping for something better than last week's Into the Dalek, and what I got was something more confusing and strange than Into the Dalek. And something that felt a little less suited to Doctor Who in a couple ways. There are a lot of good parts of this episode. We get a little bit more solid characterization of the Doctor. Stephen Moffat or Mark Gatiss, I forget which, was talking about the episode a little bit and saying that it's nice to be able to write for a new Doctor because he already knows how Eleven would have handled the situation he was in this episode. We'd have gone to see Robin Hood, been really geeky and happy about it, and it would have been a great time, and that would have been it. But now that they're writing for a new Doctor, they have to consider new ways for that interaction to happen. So what we get is 12 being really incredulous and skeptical throughout the episode, which is kind of refreshing in a way. It's nice to see, you know, the Doctor go into a situation where he kind of looks around and goes, yeah, this can't be a thing. This isn't a thing. It's not real. It's a story.
You skinny blackguard! What are you doing?
This isn't a real sandal.
Yes, it is.
Oh, yes, it is.
So you get this much more down-to-earth, logical sort of point of view out of the Doctor, which is cool. I actually kind of liked it. I prefer 12's manner of going through this episode to what 11 or 10 would have done. I think that either 10 or 11 would have been, you know, really optimistic and really like, oh, this is so cool. But instead, you know, we get 12. He's very cynical. He's trying to figure out what's wrong that's causing a story to come to life.
All those diseases. If you were real, you'd be dead in 6 months.
I am real.
Aye.
But at the same time, we also have weird quirks with 12 that don't entirely seem to fit. I guess the thing is, since watching, you know, William Hartnell's time as the first Doctor, and a little bit with 3 as well, I guess I'm just not used to an older Doctor, and I guess that's kind of the point of these episodes, really showing the differences between 11 and 12. We need to get used to a Doctor that is different from what we've seen for the last 9-10 years. But his quirks feel like they would fit with another Doctor as well. He sword fights with a spoon really early in the episode, and he makes a big deal out of it, which, you know, for 11 or 10 to be like, haha, spoon, but for 12 he just sort of, it almost felt exactly like that. It's like, a spoon, and then he goes at it, and it's sort of, okay, weird.
Because I am the Doctor. And this is my spoon. Hunger!
I guess the idea was that most of this episode is just an homage to the entire Robin Hood mythos. The spoon thing was a reference to, I can't remember exactly what the story was. It might have been Prince of Thieves. I forget which, but there's a story where he fights with a fork and wins. So I guess the idea was that it was supposed to be sort of a nod to that. And there's some cool stuff. You know, there's a lot of neat references that I'll talk a bit more about in the spoilery version. But it's strange, I guess. He's quirky in ways that doesn't entirely match the vision of him we've had so far. But maybe that's part of his character, is that, you know, I mentioned in Into the Dalek that he makes these jokes, you know, that seem a little out of place for him, but, you know, they're part of his character, this like smirking grandpa. Right, so he's kind of dark and serious and very straightforward, and he looks a little angry. But then he'll crack this joke, but he won't let on that it's a joke. You'll just kind of almost feel like, you know, you're getting this sort of aside kind of, all right. Like, he's kind of winking at you with some of these characterizations.
Soiled myself.
Did you? That's getting into character.
So it's you know, you get some characterizations like that are strange. And then you have this epic pissing contest through the entire episode. Like, it's not just a 5-minute thing. Most of most of the Doctor's personal conflict comes from him interacting with Robin Hood and refusing outright to believe that he is real. And on top of that, just being annoyed by the way that Robin Hood portrays himself. What's interesting is the Robin Hood, you know, the actor playing Robin Hood does a perfect job of it. It's a perfect iteration of Robin Hood. Very jovial, very like played up sort of hero. In a way that he almost seems like, you know, I mean, maybe that's part of the point. He seems sort of like this amalgam of past Doctor personalities, and, you know, he smiles a lot, and he makes jokes, and he does it to cover the fact that he's really, you know, worried about what's happening. And that's something that 12 doesn't really follow along with. He's very serious. He doesn't joke around much. And when he jokes, it's sort of, you know, that one-off thing just to lighten the mood, and that's it. It's not like a carried-on thing. And he doesn't laugh and he doesn't hug, whereas Robin Hood is very laugh and hug and celebrate and woo, we did it, and it's really reminiscent of, you know, 10 and 11, and in a lot of ways, you know, a lot of the Doctors before, in the more celebratory moments. So, you know, maybe this is maybe part of the point of how this is laid out is really establishing that this Doctor is different, which is good, but they're establishing it so strongly that it is starting to get a little distracting. I think, you know, we're 3 episodes in, and by the time you guys see this, Listen will have already aired, so there'll be 4 episodes in. So we've seen a decent amount of 12 now, you know, 2 to 3 hours of him. We're not misunderstanding that he's a different person or a different personality. I mean, maybe the idea is, too, that, like, the 50th anniversary special was a chance for new fans of the show to come in, just from that point forward. And, you know, this is sort of a revival itself of the revival, and they need to establish these ground rules for the character. And that's cool, too. It's just, you know, not every episode about 11 was referring to the fact that he doesn't wear, you know, dusters and you know, Chucks anymore. They did it for a very little bit, and then moved on. Maybe part of it, too, is that Clara's still there, and Clara remembers 11 very fondly and is having a hard time getting along with 12. So, I mean, it's not impossible that there's, you know, some pointed direction to why they're being so adamant about 12 is not 11, 12 is not 11. But I'm hoping the rest of the season eases off a little bit and starts focusing on deeper plots. So I mentioned earlier that, you know, Robin Hood, his acting was really good. The Sheriff of Nottingham also was really well acted. In fact, the entire cast across the board was really well acted. The whole thing. You know, nothing felt insincere. The characters all felt appropriate. Even as the Doctor's looking around trying to figure out, you know, is it real, is it not real? The acting is spot on. It's really good, and it's really convincing. It's actually, so far, I think the best acting of the season. Deep Breath had some pretty good stuff in it, but you kind of start to feel, you know, like it's the parts being played and not the characters. Into the Dalek had some, you know, stereotypes going on in there. But Robot of Sherwood, all of the acting felt pretty, you know, straightforward and pretty good. I actually loved it. It was awesome. It's the acting that's good. It's the writing that's really weird. And, you know, I started to think about it because it's Mark Gatiss who wrote the episode, and he's been a longtime writer of Doctor Who. He co-writes Sherlock. He's done a lot of the radio dramas. And then you start to think about, all right, well, he's written a lot of episodes, so what has he done? He's done The Unquiet Dead, which is actually the first episode of the Doctor Who universe to feature Eve Miles. You've got Victory of the Daleks, which was the first time the Daleks had shown up in Moffat territory. You have Night Terrors, which scared the fucking shit out of everyone because just it's creepy as hell. You got Cold War and the Crimson Horror from last season, which were also episodes. And then, most important of all, for me anyway, is he also wrote The Idiot's Lantern. Now, for those of you who don't know, that's a Season 2, or Series 2, episode where the 10th Doctor and Rose are dealing with Mrs. Magpie, the Wire. It's some alien electrical force thing that takes over TVs and anything that, you know, is electronically controlled to consume faces for reasons. I could honestly probably quote half the episode because that episode played constantly. For some reason, in reruns, they play The Idiot's Lantern more than any other episode. I've literally still, having fallen in love with Doctor Who, I have watched The Idiot's Lantern more because so in college I was a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. I got together with friends. We watched it every single week on Sci-Fi. And before Battlestar Galactica, they would air Doctor Who. And I would wager at least 40% of the time they would air The Idiot's Lantern right before Battlestar Galactica. And after all those episodes of BSG and all the episodes of Doctor Who now, I've seen The Idiot's Lantern more than any other episode of this show. I don't even like The Idiot's Lantern. Honestly, I get bored by it, possibly because I've seen it so many times. So I started to think about it, and I realized, you know, these are the only 7 episodes that Mark Gatiss has written out of about, I think, 80-ish that have come out since the show was revived. He represents nearly 10% of the entire show thus far as writing goes. And out of all those episodes, I didn't really like any of them that much. There were moments in all of them that I liked, but most of them I didn't really like. They were boring, or they were not relevant, or they just felt so out of place in Doctor Who that it didn't make much sense, including, for what it's worth, The Unquiet Dead is another one where he came up against... there's this thing where for every companion or set of companions, they would have one particular historical episode where they visit a personal hero of either the Doctor or the companion. They had Charles Dickens was, you know, the Ninth Doctor's, you know, big writer crush that was visited with Rose. We had William Shakespeare, we had Agatha Christie, we had Vincent van Gogh, which honestly is one of my favorite episodes just because the ending makes me cry like a fucking baby. But this is the first time they decided to go with a specifically fictional character and play it up as a historical piece. And it's interesting that, you know, they would go with it that way. I get it. There's some points near the end where they start to actually, you know, talk about Robin Hood, the character, and it's a little out of place. The fact of the matter is, Mark Gatiss is the reason I watch Doctor Who. You know, it doesn't have to have been a good episode that got me into it, and it really wasn't, but it's still what made me aware of Doctor Who much earlier than I would have otherwise. I am by far the most obsessed with Doctor Who out of all my friends, and only a few of them really got into it until recently. So it's just, man, it doesn't, I'm holding out hope for the next episode. I shouldn't be watching Doctor Who and going, man, I hope the next one's a little bit more, you know, oomph and a little more, you know, awesome. But maybe I've just been spoiled. You know, Deep Breath was a season premiere. Before that, we had, you know, the 50th anniversary special. We had the Christmas special where the 11th Doctor actually regenerated. And we had the season 7, you know, finale, which led into the like trilogy of 11th Doctor on his way out and multi-Doctor stuff. So like there's a lot of bigness that just happened. And we have to get used to going back to, you know, smaller episodes, more episodic content. It doesn't all have to be strung together in one giant chain of stuff. So, you know, maybe I've been spoiled. Maybe I'm expecting too much. But either way, you know, it didn't work for me. The ending was silly as shit, and we will definitely talk about that in the spoiler version of this. But, you know, I don't know how much more I can really say about it without getting into the spoilers, so I guess I should start to cut it off now. As far as homework goes, there really isn't any. Maybe, you know, you can try watching those historical episodes just to get a taste of how the tone is usually held for those. So that would be, let's see, Series 1, The Unquiet Dead. Let's see, Series 3, The Shakespeare Code. Series 4, The Unicorn and the Wasp. Series 5, that would be Vincent and the Doctor. And I think that's all the historical ones. Deep Breath is also, you know, important for reasons I can't say right now in like the smallest possible ways. So maybe it doesn't actually need to be on the list. I don't know. I'm sorry. I didn't like it that much. I don't know. I liked it. It just wasn't an episode that I fell in love with. I believe I said last time that Into the Dalek probably wouldn't be the worst, but it was going to make a running for it. Sorry, Mark. I think that this one so far is the worst of the three, and we'll probably hang on to that for maybe the whole season. Mid-late series, there may be one more kind of fillerish episode, which this kind of sort of felt like filler. Not much was accomplished in the way of the Doctor. There was nothing from Danny Pink. There was nothing about the Doctor and Clara's relationship, minus tiny little pieces here and there. We didn't even see like Missy. So hopefully that wasn't a spoiler, an unspoiler, I guess, at the end of this whole thing. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say about it. And we'll come back next time for Listen. We'll see you then.